Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to thank you for joining our Process Map Education series. And just to introduce myself, my name is O'Neill Williams. I will be the moderator for today's session. I am also the Manager of Strategic Accounts here at Process Map. Our guest speaker for today is Dean Rossi. He is the President of Safety Culture Partners, LLC. Just a few housekeeping items before we begin the webinar. We have muted all attendee microphones to prevent any distractions. We want to ensure that everyone who joins using the telephone option does enter their audio PIN. You will have the opportunity of submitting questions at any time during the webinar using the questions tool on the GoToWebinar console. We will have a Q&A session at the end, anonymous polls throughout, along with a post-webinar survey for you to provide us with feedback on how we did. And we'll finish off by providing contact information for both Process Map and for Dean. Okay, bit of information on Process Map. Process Map is a world-class environmental health, safety, and sustainability management information system. Our customers utilize our platform in 90-plus countries around the globe and rely on our over 13 years of experience to support them on their journey to achieving world-class status. Process Map's mission is to empower customers with information to help them preserve the environment, create a safe workplace, and ensure the well-being of their employees. In essence, we help to remove the non-value-added administrative burden on EHS professionals. Process Map has an integrated SaaS or cloud-based platform that comes with a comprehensive suite of modules. Customer feedback is at the heart of its dynamic functionality. Our EHS MIS is Safe Harbor certified, supports 18-plus languages and 100-plus currencies with automatic units of measure conversions. We have very broad industry experience, working with companies in fields ranging from manufacturing to automotive to transportation. This slide shows just a sample of a few of our customers. Now, today's webinar agenda will take a look at building a business case. We'll go through the 7 steps in building a software platform business case, look at the key building blocks of an EHS MIS business case, evaluate getting to know your stakeholders, mapping the value matrix, and calculating a realistic ROI. We'll also take a look at how to select an EHS MIS platform. Dean will go through the 5 key stages in EHS MIS selection, look at the 12 key steps that would be involved in that process, help you get an understanding of what the financial investment in such a system would be, and then we'll have a conclusion followed by a Q&A session. And now, a bit of information on Dean Rossi. Dean has 25 years of EHS experience at the site, division, and corporate level. He has held multiple EHS positions at GE Plastics. Dean has served as the past Global EHS Manager at Stanley Black & Decker, along with being the past Global Director of EHS for a division at Ingersoll Rand. Most recently, Dean has served as the VP of Global EHS at XI Technologies. Dean does hold a BS in Industrial Hygiene from Purdue University, along with an MBA in Organizational Leadership and Management, with an emphasis in Organizational Leadership and Management. And he is also a Six Sigma Black Belt. Welcome, Dean. And now we'll turn the reins over to Dean, who will go into how to build a business case.
Thanks, O'Neill. And I want to say thanks to everybody out there, especially those folks that attended the first webinar. And you know, I see a lot of old friends of mine on the list today, so wanted to say a special welcome to those folks. Folks, I got to be honest with you, I'm fighting a little bit of cold, so throughout today's presentation, if you hear me cough or sneeze, I'm going to apologize up front. I would sincerely apologize for any audio disruption that may cause. So let's get started. Today we're talking about, you know, two things. One is how to build a business case to, you know, try to sell or try to purchase an EHS software system or a platform. The second then is once you get approval to, okay, let's go ahead and take a look at these, you know, how to properly select one of these vendors for to see if they meet your EHS needs. So before we get started, we're going to ask a few polling questions. So first polling question is, how familiar are you with building an EHS business case for funding approval? We're going to take a few seconds here to let everybody vote. And all right, we're going to go ahead and close out the voting now and take a look at the results. And just what we suspected, you know, some people are familiar, some people aren't that familiar. So let's kind of just take it from the top. So as you can see here, from a 30,000 foot level, you know, why do you have to build a business case? Well, in most organizations I've ever been in, you have to build a business case to justify the financial investment. And during that process, you're really looking at two things, right? You're really looking to reduce your probability of failure for the project, and you're also trying to, in your business case, you'll be putting things in there to help you reduce the risk of failure for the project, and you'll also be thinking through some things to help you increase the likelihood of getting your project approved. So that's where we're at from a 30,000 foot level. Taking a look, if we say, you know, what are some of the reasons why business cases fail when you're trying to procure some EHS software? These are some of the, you know, the 6 leading reasons why things fail, whether you're not aligned with your business goals, from, you know, all the way through to doing a poor presentation when you get a chance to present this stuff. So obviously I'm not going to read all these to you, but we have seen some common failure modes when trying to procure an EHS platform, right? There's really 7 key steps in building an EHS business case for your expenditure, right? Things usually start with some sort of catalyst, and we'll talk about some catalysts here in a minute. You really got to know your stakeholders to understand what you need to put in your presentation. You really need a good understanding of where you are in your current state versus where you want to be, and then that's a gap. So in those gaps, then you got to develop solutions to fill those gaps. You got to consolidate your value matrix. You need to estimate your financials, and then finally you got to present your business case. And the business case that's tied to your company's strategy has the best chance for your success. So remember that. You really need to tie your business case to your business strategy. All right, let's take a look at some of those catalysts that are cornerstones of the initiative. When companies have recent catastrophic events, you know, there's things going on in West Virginia, you know, today as we speak, catastrophic event. Who knows whether or not an EHS management system would have helped them prevent that? There's a good possibility that it could, right? There's things like emerging customer requirements. Your customers are asking you for more and more information on EHS. You have a lack of system to manage EHS and your sustainability KPIs. You have inefficiencies from paper-based systems. You have always have potential for negative brand image, negative company image, and legal issues, okay? As we know, healthcare costs are going up, so your workers' costs could be going up, detracting from the bottom line of your business. You know, a lot of it could have a lack of data to make informed business decisions on where to spend monies, right? And as we know, there's a lot of growing, complex global regulations out there that are becoming harder and harder to stay in compliance with. So these are usually some of the catalysts that spark people to say, hey, I need some way to manage my information and my data when it comes to the EHS function. So once those catalysts, present themselves, now you got to really understand your audience and understand your stakeholders when you give these presentations, okay? We put together this little matrix here, but what we really want to focus on is the top line, which is the C-suite function, and then the bottom line, which is the focus areas of what these people are really concerned about. Let's just take a look at a few of them. So if you're presenting out to the CEO of your business, he or she is usually worried about profits and the balance between risk and reward. These people, if you're in a publicly traded company, these types of people are also worried about stock price. So you need to understand, what's this do for earnings per share? How could this affect our stock price? If we take a look at the CFO, if you're making a presentation to the CFO, he or she is really worried about money, right? Tell me about how this is going to affect us money-wise. So here's where you got to talk about saving workers' costs, avoiding environmental fines and violations, okay? If you're talking to your executive vice president of HR people are worried about people, worried about our employees. How do we get employee satisfaction? How is this going to drive employee satisfaction? If your audience is your COO or your vice president of operations, quality groups roll underneath these people, Six Sigma groups roll underneath these people. These people are worried about efficiencies and compliance, right? And then if we take a look legal, if you look at the general counsel of your business, your general counsel is always worried about compliance and about where our risks are and what our liabilities are out there. So you need to understand your audience when you're making your presentations, because if you're making a presentation that you need an EHS data management system or information management system to the CFO, and you're only talking about the people experience that this is going to create for you, you've really missed the boat, and you're going to lose it from a CFO perspective. So again, match your presentation to the people that you're presenting to. All right? Step 3, need to understand what your current state or what your problems are. What are our problems? Why do they exist? Who's affected by it, right? A current state analysis is really a must-have when you start your business case to understand where you're at today, okay? And then, you also want to know, where do I want to get to? So, this is a real good starting point. The next step, is to develop your future state. What do you want to look like? Develop options and solutions to your challenges. You want to document your future state. You want to document how this new platform is going to support and enable your transformation to get there. And bottom line, you got to ensure that an EHS management information system can play a key vital role in the transformation to get you to where you desire to be. And if that's world class, if that's getting better, wherever that desire is, you got to show how a system like this is going to get you there. Right? When you start to consolidate the EHS management information value matrix, there's intangible things here in the blue, and there's those hard numbers in the green. When you start to build a business case, undoubtedly you're going to be asked to put together an ROI, or return on your investment, right? And in the EHS field, the most things that we have to deal with are really cost avoidance. And the financial people really get wishy-washy when you talk about cost avoidance. Let me give you an everyday example. When you drove to work today, you didn't get a speeding ticket, okay? So did you save $100 today because you didn't get a speeding ticket? And if you saved that $100, where is that $100, okay? What you really did is you avoided that spend today. You didn't save a dime, but you avoided that spend. Most everything that we do in the EHS field is really cost avoidance. Whether it's reducing your workers' comp costs, we're avoiding those injuries, we're avoiding those costs. If you're reducing your fines and penalties that you may get from your government bodies, that's a cost avoidance. Waste minimization, you could argue, is a true cost savings. Energy reduction, a cost savings. Finding out what chemicals that you're buying, materials that you're buying, getting the leverage on that, potentially a cost savings. Reducing the head count, If you have 3 or 4 data analysts and a system like this can reduce one of those headcounts, that's a true cost savings. So there's difference between cost savings and cost avoidance. Unfortunately, what a lot of us have to deal with is cost avoidance. Now, got to tell you a story, okay? I once worked for a business that was mandatory that in order to invest for anything, you had to show a real return on investment, okay? So I'm sitting there thinking one day, how in the heck am I going to show a return on investment on EHS software when there's no real savings? And I was sitting in my offices and I was looking out in the parking lot, and long and behold, in the parking lot, they're resurfacing the parking lot, okay? They got major equipment out there. They got 15, 20 guys out there working. They're working all day, and I'm sitting in my office and I'm thinking to myself, how did they get the funding to get the parking lot repaved? What's the return on investment in paving the parking lot? And at the end of the day, there isn't a return on investment in paving a parking lot, yet there was a business decision made that this is what we need to do. Whether it's fixing holes in the roof, or paving a parking lot, or painting a building, or buying office furniture, right? There's no return on investments on those things. You have to argue sometimes the same way with EHS software. Some of the things that we need to do because it helps us with our regulatory reporting, it helps us stay in compliance, it helps us become more efficient. You have to sell those non-tangibles when you're building a business case. Very, very important, okay? So if you're in a business where it says ROI is king, I just gave you a few examples where we do things for the right reason at times. Okay, so let's talk about navigating through the financials, okay? The biggest thing that you have to do here is you've got to get collaborative. You've got to collaborate with other functions, okay? You've got to understand how your business views capital expenditures, what we call CapEx, and how they view operational expense that we call OpEx, okay? There's a huge difference. You need to sit down and do Finance 101 with your financial people to understand the difference, understand the requirements for EHS software. You're going to have to estimate, some budget items such as the software investment, the implementation cost by the vendor, and your own internal implementation costs, okay? Remember, when you go through this process, you have 3 amigos. You have 3 of your best friends. You've got to collaborate with your information technology people, your purchasing or sourcing people, and also your finance people. If you try to go it alone, you're going to really struggle and come across a lot of headwind, okay? So you get your business case put together, you're following your company's procedures, and now comes time for your presentation. 2 key things to focus on. One is to focus on the strategic benefits, right? We talk about cost avoidance and cost savings. We need to talk about improved efficiencies. We need to talk about data integrity and accuracy, about how we get benefits and leverage from standardizing our processes, about how it's going to help us drive compliance assurance, and how it's going to increase the employee health and safety. Now, we had that matrix earlier with the stakeholders. Let's kind of walk through this. Cost avoidance and cost savings, important to the CEO, important to the CFO, right? Improved efficiencies, important to the Vice President of Operations or your CEO. Data integrity and data accuracy. Your General Counsel is going to perk up his ears. Standardized processes. We get leverage here. Your operations people are going to perk up. Compliance insurance, okay? That's going to ring home with your CEO and your General Counsel. And employee health and safety, right? Employee satisfaction is what you're really selling here. And that is where your Executive Vice President of HR is going to be most attuned to. So you got to make sure that you touch all the bases when you present a business case on this, okay? When you're doing your presentation, it helps if you can cite relevant examples, both internal examples on how you failed, external examples of what you've seen out there in other business cases that you've seen where people have failed externally because of lack of these types of management systems. And then you give examples of how you're going to improve specific EHS processes, whether it's, Pareto analysis to find out where your injuries are happening, optimizing wastewater treatment plants, reducing workers' comp costs, whatever it is, give examples on how this system is going to help you. Okay? So remember, a business case is not only about the financials. All right. So again, work with your internal finance people, sourcing IT people, to understand what's the policy and what's the procedures in your corporation. Okay, the second part then is, once we get through that, is now how do you really select an EHS management information platform, right? Well, there's 5 key stages, and in those stages we already talked about developing your business case. We're going to talk about team selection. We're going to talk about how do you know what you want and what you need in the system, right? We're going to talk about you should have multiple vendors that you're working with. How do you determine which vendor is best for you, right? And then finally, the last step, the last stage is your vendor selection process. So let's walk through these, okay? What I just kind of broke down to you, it's really a 12-step process. And, you know, I hear you laughing now. Here's another 12-step process. I can assure you that when I was putting this together, you know, I didn't have 12 steps in mind. But when we were done and we started adding up and numbering them, we were shocked that at the end we shook our heads and said, oh my God, it's a 12-step process. So I can assure you it's by happenstance and not by not on purpose. So I'm not going to read this to you, but we're going to go through these in detail. So let's start with team selection. Okay, very, very important, okay? You've got to get the people on your team who's going to use this system. So to me, that was our EHS leaders, our plant nurses on at our locations. You've got to, if you're a global company, you've got to include your foreign locations. This can't be a U.S.-based process or you're going to fail miserably, okay? And oh, by the way, if you're in one of those businesses where EH&S is siloed, if you have, you know, an environmental director, a safety director, and a health director, you've got to break down those silos and you've got to get all 3 of them, okay? All 3 of them in this process, otherwise at the end of the day, somebody can throw up a red flag and say, hey, your system that you chose for safety doesn't do anything for me in environmental. So you're going to go through months and months of work, and at the end, somebody within your organization is going to throw up a red flag and it's going to knock you clean out of the process, okay? You got to get one person at least from your sourcing or your purchasing operation. Get a person in from HR because they're going to ask you a lot of questions about, hey, how safe is the data? We got personal data in there. I need to know how safe it is. Risk management is going to want to know how we're going to link this to workers' comp. Legal is going to be really nervous about our documents, and other people, okay? At the end of the day, folks, when you're going through this process, more is better than less. The more people you can get on a team, the better off you'll be. Last time I did this, I had between, I think it was 10 to 15 people on my team, okay? So, time for another polling question. We use some simple tools, but we want to know how familiar people are. So, you know, I want to know what's your familiarity with group brainstorming sessions, right? Let's take a minute here. Let me know if you're very familiar with it, somewhat familiar, you've used it a couple times, you've heard of it but not used it, or you've never heard of it. All right, couple seconds here. All right, let's go ahead and close it out and see what we got. And just as I expected, 63% of you, as I've said, very familiar with brainstorming sessions, and 19% of you somewhat familiar, and only a couple of you have never heard it. So brainstorming is pretty simple. Okay, once you gather your team, ideally you want to get as much as your team as you can together in one room. Okay. Again, if you're a global company, you got global people, dial in your remote members. You know, get a WebEx going, whatever you use to dial in remote people that you can share information. Okay, either start with a blank computer screen or whiteboards, And you know, when I do this, I tell people, if you were going to build something from scratch, what would it look like, right? This is your Christmas list, right? Let's just take a minute and brainstorm everything that we'd want a system to be for us, right? And somebody's up on the whiteboard or somebody's on the computer and just writing down everybody's ideas. Remember, okay, you want to engage everybody in this process. And no idea is a bad idea when you start off. Just capture everything that people say, okay? Let's take a look at the next slide. And what you'll see here is I've included a snapshot of just an example of what this may look like, right? As you can see, people are throwing things up on the board. It's a group. We're just throwing everything up on the board, okay? So now we need to make some sort of order out of this chaos, right? We need to start separating things, separating our wants into certain categories, okay? So this really helps us add structure to the process. If we take a look at, if we transfer this to an Excel spreadsheet then, what you can see here, this is an example of, we threw these in the buckets, and we're going to open up this Excel spreadsheet. I just want to give you a flavor for how, you know, how much detail goes into this. So you can see in section 1, we took everybody's ideas and we threw them into general requirements, and we ended up with like 21 general requirements. If you scroll down to section number 2, you can see that section number 2 is our environmental requirements that we came up with. We had 10 big ones. You know, section 3 was our health requirements. Section 4 is our safety requirements. Okay. And then, you know, I just want to show you, if we scroll all the way down, we had like, you know, some 90-some requirements that we captured. So again, we took everything from the whiteboard, we put them into categories, and then we continued as a team to kind of flesh these out a little bit, okay? So again, it's a process. I think we took 2 hours initially to go through this when I've done this before in the past, and then, you know, some time to flesh it out afterwards, okay? So it's a process, right? So now what we need to do is we need to force rank these. So again, I just want to understand how familiar you are with force ranking. Again, same kind of format. Are you very familiar? Somewhat familiar? A couple more seconds here if you get a chance to vote. Okay, last chance. All right, let's go ahead and close that poll and take a look at the results. And as I expected, you know, most of you are familiar, either somewhat familiar. So we'll walk through it real quick just for people. Force ranking is pretty simple. Force ranking, you know, you have your spreadsheet that we had our wants. You send that out to everybody, and you just ask them to rank them from the most important to the least important, okay? We're going to open up this Excel spreadsheet then. We're going to take that very same list of wants that we just had. Okay? So we took that very same list of wants that we had, and now we've got our team across the top. As you can see, we have our plant people, we've got legal, we got IT, and for each section we just ask people from 1 to 21, what is your, you know, your most important to you, and what's, you know, keep ranking them 1, 2, 3, 4 to 21 in each section to what's least important to you. And then everybody gets a chance to vote. And then over on the right-hand side then is the average, okay? So as you can see, the first one scored a 3, the second one a 6.8, the next one 12.3, so on and so forth, okay? So everybody gets a chance to vote. Now, okay, now that you have your averages, you can now just force rank them, right? And so now we're just ranking them from lowest to highest. Okay, so now these up top, these these are what we need in the system, right? These top 3 to 5 in each one of these sections are what we need in the system. The ones further down the list, down to like number 21, these are some of the wants, right? These are nice to haves. You know, it'd be nice if my car had a rocket engine, right, that I could go super fast, but you know, that's not really a need, that's a want. It's the same thing when you start force ranking these. We'll go down and take a look at the environmental section. There was 10 things in the environmental section, okay? And again, just by force ranking these, now we can start separating our wants from our needs, okay? Pretty simple. The thing that you have to do here with the team is make sure that everybody understands that it's a group consensus, okay, that we're going to operate this way, we're going to force rank this way, and however they come out, that's, as a team, that's what we're going to get bought into, because somebody's going to say, well, I had that as number 21, and somebody's going to say, I had that as number 1, right, okay? But at the end of the day, it's a group consensus that the numbers are going to rule, okay? So again, multi-voting separates what we must have from a functionality standpoint to what's nice to have from a functionality standpoint, okay? So force ranking really separates your wants from your needs. Okay, we just took a look at that. All right, so from here then, we need to start developing a request for information, okay? Very simply, the way that we do a request for information is, first of all, is to take that list of wants and needs that we just force ranked and remove the ranking from that list, okay? Work as a team to identify the EHS management information system vendors who are out there that you'd like to work with. Last time I did this, we came up with a list of 9 vendors, and I just asked the people on the team, who have you heard of, who have you worked with before? Some people did some Google searches and said we ought to talk to these vendors, okay? We sent a nice cover letter. We told them we're looking for information about their systems. We have this list of things, and we want to ask them, you know, how capable is your system to meet our needs? Let's take a look then. You'll notice when we blow up this the list, okay? Again, this is the same list that we just force rank. We send it out to a vendor, and this is what a vendor came back and told us, okay? You know, our number 1 requirement is that the system must be easy and intuitive to use with little or no instructions or training. This vendor came back and said, yep, that's us, no problem here, okay? Our second most important need was must have multiple languages. We're a global company. Says, yeah, we can do that, but there's some modifications. Okay, the third thing that we said is, hey, we need a system to be real time. And the vendor came back and said, well, we have to do some major modifications if you want it to be real time because our data is only refreshed weekly. Okay, so if you scroll down here, if we scroll down, we can see, you know, out of all those things that we had listed, all the vendors come back and, you know, all 9 vendors send us back these checklists so we can start then evaluating the vendors from how capable are they off the shelf. Okay? Very important step. Okay? At this point in time, very important here, people, and you're going to hear me stress this a couple times, do not ask about pricing at this point in time. And I'm going to stress this a few times. This process is about finding a solution to your problems that's going to meet your needs and not about finding the low-cost vendor, okay? And I'm going to hit on this a little bit later in the presentation, but just remember that. This is not a pricing, you know, process. This is a function process, meeting your function. All right, let's go on the next slide. So, we need to talk about multi-voting here now to vet through the vendors. So again, we're going to ask a question: is how familiar are you with multi-voting? Okay, same kind of format. give people a chance to vote here for a second. Okay, anybody else? Going once. Multi-voting. Going twice. Get your multi-voting here. All right, let's go ahead and close this one out. Take a look at the results. And survey says not as many people familiar with multi-voting, but still a good over half of you are familiar with multi-voting. Okay, let's just review multi-voting real quick for those of you that aren't familiar with it. Okay, so when you get the request for information back, you want to discuss the vendor replies as a team. Remember, everything that you do in this process is not you as a leader, but this is a team event, because at the end of the day, this has to be a team decision if you want to be successful. Okay? So now we started with 9, 10, 15 vendors. We need to get this down to 3. Okay? So now we're going to multi-vote. Okay? So each team member, there's a couple ways to multi-vote. Okay? One of it is each team member could get 5 votes, right? So for his or her favorite vendor that they thought meets our needs, you can give that vendor a score of 5. The second vendor a score of 4, the third vendor a score of 3, your fourth choice a 2, and your fifth choice a 1. Okay? You can add up all the individual team votes for each vendor, and the 3 vendors with the highest average score move on to the next round. Another way to do that is you can say 1, 2, 3, this is my favorite vendor, it's my second favorite vendor, third favorite vendor, and then the lowest total, gets to move on, right, to the next round. So what multi-voting does, it helps you, for those of you who got a Six Sigma background, it helps you separate the vital few vendors from the trivial many. So now we started with, say, 10, 15, 20 vendors. Now we're getting down to the vital few, so now we can really focus. It gets us down to the final 3. Okay? So, step number 8. Now that you got your final 3 vendors, as a team, you need to develop a list of scenarios that you want each vendor to show you how their solution helps, or how their solution handles these scenarios. Now, think about everything that you do from an EHS standpoint, whether it's, entering wastewater treatment data, doing incident reports, corrective actions from audits, action items from incident reports, risk assessments, behavioral-based safety, right? Everything that you're doing, calculating greenhouse gas emissions. Work up some real-life scenarios tailored to your business and send those scenarios to the last 3 vendors, okay? And I think what we did is we took, 3 to 5 scenarios from safety, from health, from industrial hygiene, from risk management, from environmental, from sustainability, 3 to 5 real-time scenarios, send them to the vendors, and then we ask those vendors to pick a time to come on site. We'll give you 2 hours, and we want to see your solution walk through our problems. Okay? So when they come on site, then there's some things to look for. Okay? User friendliness. How friendly is the system? Completeness of the system. Flexibility of the system. How easy is it to pull reports? And how does the workflow, match to what you currently do? Okay? Got to make sure your team members take notes. Make sure each team member ranks the scenarios for each vendor. After the demos, discuss as a team the pros and cons. Again, have the team multi-vote to get down to the last 2 vendors. And again, folks, the more you can get real-life scenarios to these vendors and to see how they actually have a solution to your problems, the better you'll be. Okay, very important. Okay, and then here's one way to do it. To get down to the last 2 vendors, we said, okay, here's vendor number 1, number 2, number 3. Rank them. Who's your favorite one? Okay, give your favorite one to number 1, your second favorite vendor number 2, and your third favorite vendor number 3. One way you can do this is color-coded. Anything that's a 1, color-coded green. Anything that's a 3, color-coded red. And you can see here that vendor 1 is starting to stand out versus vendor number 3. Add up the totals. Do an average. Again, because you're using the low numbers first, the lower numbers are your final rank. Okay? So as you can see, both by a number standpoint and just by visually looking at it, you can see as a team that, okay, as a team, we're going to decide to really work with vendor number 1 and number 2. Okay? Pretty straightforward, pretty simple. It gives you a lot of process, though, so you take the emotion out of these types of things. It's all about meeting your needs. Okay? For the final 2 vendors, you want some sandbox time. Okay? You want to ask for a live version to play in it. You got to let your people play for 4 to 6 weeks. Remember, folks, okay, one thing that I've always told my teams, we're going to make a large investment here, and the investment that we're going to make is not only for today, but it's for future generations of EHS people coming into this business into the future. So we got to do our due diligence to make sure we pick the right vendor. Okay? Again, I apologize. You know, walk through all those scenarios, okay? And make sure that your vendor can track the people's playtime. And you want to review that playtime with your members to say, hey, if we're going to spend money and pick a vendor, you got to be using the system, okay? And then remember the 3 F's. Excuse me, being friendly, functional, and having flexibility in your system. Okay? Step 10 is a reference check. Talk to their customers if they'll allow you to. You know, go see those customers. You know, see the system real time in a real world scenario. If you get a chance to do that, highly recommend it. Okay, important step here. You know, do your information technology due diligence up front. Okay, IT holds the key. Okay, a couple vendors I looked at, the IT department came to me and said, no way, they don't have the security. Anybody can hack into the system. You know, if you do all this work and you pick one of those vendors at your IT department will tell you, no way, you've wasted a lot of time. Okay, so make sure you do your due diligence. Okay. Lastly, now's the time that you start asking for a request for a proposal. Okay. Work with your IT department, your sourcing, purchasing department. Okay. And ask them to help you put together a proposal. This is one of the reasons why you got these people on the team. They can help you with this, right? You need to look at licensing fees, maintenance fees, upgrade costs, configuration costs, data feeds, training costs. You need to look at, you know, ask for a proposal on all these things that's going to be necessary for you to procure this system for your company. Okay? So this really brings the process to a close. All right. Now, the question that all of you are probably out there asking yourself is, okay, how much does something like this cost? Okay. Now, the answer to that is that it's highly variable and is dependent on your needs. Okay. We've given you 3 scenarios here, kind of locations, employee size, what kind of modules you're looking for, how much data you want to migrate into the system. Do you want any touch points to automatically draw information in from your third-party administrator, from your workers' comp, from your IH labs, you know, from your doctors, those types of things. And you can see some of the costs. Now, one of the things that I wanted to bring to your attention is that when you see some of these numbers, you may say, you know, things to yourself, oh my God, that's a lot of money. How can I go approach my business for that kind of money? If you take a look at what your HR systems cost and your financial systems cost, these EHS systems, although they are costly, they're fractions of the dollars of what other functions are spending to run their functions accordingly, okay? So, again, don't be shocked with the numbers, okay? Other functions, too, have to have the tools that they need to run those functions. We, too, as an EHS function, have to have the tools that we need to run our departments, our functions efficiently, okay? Very good. kind of wrapping it up here, we talked about knowing your audience and building your business case, right? It's very important to select your team. You got to get a lot of people on your team, a wide variety, global if you're a global company. You got to understand, what do we want? What do we need, right? I gave you some tools on how to separate your wants from your needs, right? Gave you some tools then on, you got all these vendors, everybody loves their one vendor. A group consensus gets us to the right vendor, okay? This isn't about you today, this is about your company into the future, okay? We have to be good stewards, okay? And then finally, when you narrowed it all down and you let the process get to itself, you can get onto your vendor selection, okay? Remember, you gotta focus on functionality and not cost. And if we take a look at, I'd want to give you one example of a vendor that came to me, and I'm going to give you, excuse me, I'm going to give you something that really happened to me. Excuse me. If we take a look at the environmental requirements that we as a team came up with, we said that we have to have a system that has the ability to collect a wide variety of environmental incidents, metrics, and track environmental permit fees. This company that wrote back said, you know what, we really can't do this, okay? So when I was giving a presentation one time to the committee who was making this, a CFO asked me, he said, Dean, he said, what was the price for the second vendor? And I told him, I said, you know what? I said, I didn't get a price for the second vendor, and I said, let me tell you why. I said, the second vendor didn't have the capability to meet our needs, and I did not want to waste our hard-earned money in buying a system because it was cheaper that we can't use. So this process should never, ever be about cost. This process should be about an investment that's going to meet your people's needs to make you more efficient, more compliant, and more cost avoidance as you move forward, okay? So with that said, I can tell you the CIO that I had on my team, he was flabbergasted by this process that we put together. And in the company I work for, he now makes this process mandatory for any function that comes to him to evaluate software. They have to go through this process, okay? So it's a process that works. It's a process that takes emotion out of it. It's a process that takes, hey, I like this vendor versus that vendor. And it's a process that assures you buy-in. And with that said, then, we're going to open up the presentation for questions and answers. Excuse me. So if you have a question, please use the question part of the webinar to ask a question. Okay, so first question we have here is regarding business case. Who in the organization needs to what? To be sold first? That's a good question. So the question is, who in the organization needs to be sold first? Well, you always start with your boss, and you go up the chain, right? It's a good rule of thumb. So, no matter who you report to, and again, if it's not somebody in EHS, if it's to a different function, you got to understand what drives them, and you got to talk in their language. So if you're in the EHS and you report through the finance organization, you got to talk about financial. If you report to HR up in the organization, you got to talk about employee satisfaction. Okay, so in order to get approval, you start at your boss. And you let your boss dictate how far up in the system it needs to go. Now your boss is going to probably tell you, he's going to probably say, well, how much does it cost, right? And you say, okay, at this point in time, I can give you some rough estimates that we had on that slide for you, but in order to nail it down, I need to build a team to go through a process, okay, to build the team fully. Okay? All right, next question. Do you have to come up with hard costs during a business case? And that's an answer of it depends. And it depends depending on your company and the culture within your company. If your company culture is one that, hey, we have to have an ROI of a payback of less than 2 years, then that's your company, and that's what you're going to have to deal with. So, I once worked for a CEO at one point in time who cared about people. He didn't care so much about workers' comp costs. He cared about people getting hurt. And he told us if we didn't have the accident up front, we wouldn't have to ever look at the workers' comp costs. So he was concerned about people. So, I could sell him a system like this, pretty much without showing the numbers. So it's an answer of it depends, and it depends on your company culture. Okay? Next question. Why vendor selections fail? Is it no consequences or other reasons? Well, the biggest reason I think why vendor selections fail that I've seen before is a couple things. One, to your point, you don't get buy-in, right? I've seen processes go through that they didn't involve the risk management person, and they got down to the end and they wanted to pull the trigger, and all of a sudden the risk management person heard about this and said, well, wait a second, how's this going to turn? And then at that point in time, nobody had an answer, so it put a kibosh to the thing, all right? Other reasons that has failed is that you didn't do the due diligence, right? You didn't know what your wants and needs were. You just thought that you needed a system, but you didn't know what you wanted or what you needed. And if you don't know what you want and need, and you buy a system, and now it doesn't meet your wants and needs, that's a failure point, okay? So there's multiple reasons why it ends. Those are some of the most familiar. Okay. Can you type it up here? All right, folks, we're just collecting a few more questions. Next question here. How soon into the process do I bring my leadership team to meet the vendor? Okay. Well, that's a good question. And again, it depends on your culture. Okay. When I've done this before in the past, the team that I put together as the selection team, we worked with the vendors at that point in time. Okay. So at the end, when it was a team consensus, I went in and had a report out to the software committee that did approvals. And on that committee was the CEO, the CFO, the legal counsel, and the EVP of HR, and the CIO, right? Had to do a presentation. At that level, in the businesses I were at, they had no desire to meet the vendor, but they needed to know the process that we got to that vendor. Telling them that we had a global team with multiple functions on that team, really sold the process, and they understood, okay, you guys did your due diligence. You did a great job on the due diligence. The CIO said it was the best thing he's ever seen. My leadership team had no desire to meet the vendors. You may be in a business where your leadership team wants to meet them. I would do the last two, but again, you got to make sure if you do the last two that this thing doesn't come down to cost. If one is $50,000 a year cheaper, but it doesn't meet your needs, you're wasting money, okay? And I can't stress that enough. This thing can't be about cost. It's about meeting your needs. Now, if both vendors meet your needs and you have different costs and they both meet your needs equally, by all means, at that point in time, it's a cost decision, okay? How to get facilities on board when corporate is pushing the initiative. Like anything else in this world, folks, it's about buy-in, right? Get them a part of the team. They got to understand the risk that we face by not managing this information. You got to let them know that, this is something that we're going to do, that we have to do. We want you to come on board to be part of this process to help us pick the vendor that's going to have the least pain for them, right, and the most use out of them. So be more inclusive than exclusive. Ask them to join the team. Let them know that it's a business decision, that this is the way that we're going, okay? And we want them to be part of this team to help us pick the right vendor. Get them to be part of the solution and not part of the problem. Okay, next question. As part of the reference check, what are the important things to verify? Well, you want to verify what the vendors told you, okay? How easy is it to use the system? Ask if there's any glitches. Ask what kind of issues they found. Ask them how easy it is to work with the vendor. Those are all things that you want to ask the people who are using the system to get a feel for how easy the system is, how good is the company to work with. All those things that you'd be interested in are all important things to ask. Okay? Maybe take a couple more questions. Can you please provide some guidance on customizations versus configurability while working on the requirements? Okay? Again, my suggestion is to let the process run its course. Okay? If you want dimethyl depth chicken wire automatically added from a monitor right into the system, ask your vendors if they can do that. Okay? And if you remember that vendor selection process, when the vendors came back and said, yes, I can do that out of the box, I can do that, but it's going to take some modifications, I can do that, but it's going to be very costly, or I can't do that, you may then want to pick and choose how you're going to spend monies to get done what's very important to you. So, you got to let the process run itself through and then see how the vendors match up with your wants and needs. Okay? Maybe time for one more question. We have another question anywhere? All right. I think that's pretty much all the questions that we have. But if we didn't get to your specific question, or if you have questions after the fact, you can certainly contact us. And with that, I'll turn it back over to O'Neill.
Thank you very much, Dean. All right, wonderful. So we provided the contact information here for both Dean Rossi and ProcessMap. If you do have any questions for Dean, you can certainly feel free to send him an email to the address provided there. If you have questions for ProcessMap, would like to engage us, if you are in the process of evaluating a provider, our contact information is there for you as well. Do remember we're going to be sending out a feedback survey once this webinar concludes. Certainly provide us with feedback on what you thought of this webinar, any elements that we can improve. We're always glad to get that feedback from you. So again, we do want to thank everyone who participated in the webinar today, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.